Before we kick off today's episode, I got something that could save you a ton of time this season. If you're a grassroots coach trying to juggle work, life, and soccer, Soccer Coach Weekly is an absolute game changer. Since 2006, they have been trusted by coaches from all over the world, delivering fun, ready-to-go drills that keep players focused, learning, and loving the game, even when you're short on time. And here's the best part. Chat by the Pitch listeners get 50% off a full year of premium access. Just click the link in show notes and use the promo code Ian50 at checkout. That's Ian50 for half off. Plan fast, coach smart, Soccer Coach Weekly.
I want to tell you about something I've used and I truly believe in. Replayer. It's a sideline camera built for youth sports. Just set it up, hit record, and it captures the entire game automatically. No chasing the ball, no holding your phone, just hands-free, stress-free recording. The in-game tagging is one of my favorite features. One tap, and you can mark a big goal, ankle-breaking moves, or a clutch tackle. Then pull those clips for later for review, highlights, or social media. And the live streaming's next level. A buddy of mine actually watched his son's game while flying cross-country at 30,000 feet. That blew me away. If you're a parent or coach at the field every weekend, Replayer is a game changer. Head to replayer.com. That's REEPLAYER.com. And I think you'll be amazed.
Family-owned Soccer Innovation is your go-to source for top-quality equipment. Whether you're a player, a supportive family member, or a dedicated coach, they have everything you need to elevate your game. For players, their innovative equipment are designed to boost your skills and performance on the pitch. From their agility cones to their portable goals, they have you covered. And family members, they offer durable equipment that's built to last because we know your support is critical to your player. Coaches, trust me, they can provide the equipment you need to run effective training sessions and shape the next generation of soccer players. Visit Soccer Innovations at soccerinnovations.com to start elevating your game with them.
And if you use the code PITCH, PITCH, you can receive up to 10% off your next order.
Hey soccer friends, I just want to give a shout out to our partner, Team Player. They are changing the game on how you find the perfect soccer team for your player. Parents, this means no more endless social media scrolling to find information on teams. With Team Player, everything you need to know is just a few clicks away. It's simple, straightforward, and lets you find the best coach and team for your player without any of the usual headaches. And coaches, we all know how tough it can be to get your team noticed, but when you subscribe to one of Team Player's team plans, you instantly get access to set up an online team profile that allows you to reach more potential players and showcase what your team is all about. It's super easy and lets players and parents see why your team could be the right fit for them. And if you sign up using the promo code PITCH, you can try any team plan free for 1 month. So whether you're managing a team or searching for one, come on over to www.teamplayer.us. That is TEAMPLAYR.US. And come give Team Player a look. Hey everyone, this is Ian Babcock, your host. I'm not going to talk too much about the guest this week. I'm going to let her talk about herself. It's Dr. Hilary Cauthen, and she runs TOPS, and she is a clinical sports psychologist, and I think she offers a lot to athletes. She's worked from pro soccer teams to NBA teams. The list goes on, and I'm not going to go into the details. I'll let her give her background. But before we jump into this, I want you all to think about what she has to say and the importance of it. We have a 2-part series here, like with most of my guests. I wanted to break it up. There's a lot we dived into. There's a lot we talked about. And I think that was very important for this episode to hit all these different topics. So let's start this chat and head to the pitch.
Hey, I'm Dr. Hilary Cauthen. I'm a clinical sports psychologist based in Austin, Texas. I am work on a continuum of care model. So I'm a licensed psychologist and then also a certified performance consultant. And in my private practice in Austin, I have 6 other coaches that work in the practice, working on mental performance, mental health, executive coaching. By that, I'm also an author of a book called Hello Trauma, Our Invisible Teammate, the host of the Highs and Lows of X's and O's podcast, and I can't forget I'm a mom of 4 wonderful girls. So that is also a highlight of what I did.
Awesome. So let's start off with your book, Hello Trauma, Our Invisible Teammate. When I read this, I'm like, come on, I know it gets to the sports side. I was waiting for it.
Yeah.
And I sent it, as soon as I finish it, I sent it to about a dozen, maybe more folks. Listen to this. It has a twist. You're going to love it. So let's talk about your book a little bit. So what inspired you to frame the book this way? Because to me, this was a phenomenal approach.
Oh,
as
I
a
appreciate
parent
that.
trying to help my kids with stuff.
Yeah, it really evolved. I did a TEDx in 2018 called The Toxic Culture of Sport on Athletes' Mental Health. And that was the first time I ever spoken out about the dark side of sport. As much as I'm passionate, been an avid athlete my entire life, and I work with athletics on so many different populations, and I see the true nature of how sport can be good. I also have just experienced myself personally, witnessed stories, been a part of organizations where the organization and system was failing and the individual athletes were struggling and to make meaning of it. And we're sticking with kind of the status quo of what we felt was acceptable because it was sport and it was going to help them succeed. And when I set a goal, I'll never forget this. It was 2022 where I said, going around in executive meetings, like, what's your goal? And it was, run a marathon and this and that, health goals. And I was like, I'm going to write a book. Okay. It's like, I have no idea what I'm going to do, but I'm going to write a book. And I sat with it and I had my TEDx coach connect with me and I worked through this process and I realized like I needed to do it in a creative way to help make meaning of what trauma actually is and how it exists. And I really like to challenge to break the status quo of these cultural pop terms like big T, little T trauma and all this stuff. And everything's a trigger and that stuff always annoys me as well. And so I was like, let me just break it down. And I'm going to give a voice to those that feel like their voice has been silenced. And I'm going to help understand and create a very common space of humanity to understand what this is. And so the book creatively, which was really hard to do, to tie up my huge message in one book, it really emotionally evokes you into trauma and the stages of what a person who experiences trauma goes through to help emotionally connect and then psychologically explain. But then the second half of the book is this call to action and using sport as a microcosm of society that reinforces trauma to exist if we don't get it right. And this is not just in sport. This book can be for any non-athlete as well. It can be for organizational leaders. Like it's setting a stage to say, this stuff happens everywhere, but because we romanticize sport and that is my passion, I'm going to utilize that for this book. And so I gave a little feel into it and then a call to action and a how to, and then an ask. And so it's a lot wrapped into one small, quick little book.
Honestly, I do a lot of audiobooks because it allows me to do more during my day.
Mm-hmm.
And to sit down to actually read is very hard for me. I'm dyslexic and I personally don't like reading. And I spend a lot of time throughout my day dealing with numbers and text files and things like that. So I'm forced to read all day long. And so when I get in the car listening to your book, I actually had to pause and re-listen to certain parts because as someone that we all have trauma in our life. I think you talked about the stat of how many people have trauma in their life. I think you said it was something that I think it was like 3 out of 4 people or
like 70%
something.
will admit that they've experienced trauma. Yeah.
And I'm like, that has to be higher in my head. But listening to it and to understand what trauma is, and I like how you broke down trauma and what it means and the definition of it, because I think most people don't understand what it means. And then you put the twist into it with the sports, which you said this is universal. I agree. I work in corporate America. I have a lot of friends that I actually recommended this book that are leaders within corporations, and 2 of them have gotten back to me and this is a great example of how to help lead people and how to build a pathway. So why did you call it the invisible teammate? Because to me, I know it's internal, but if the stat is 70% of folks admit to it, is it really invisible? Or are we just choosing to ignore it?
Yeah, I think the juxtaposition to both of the hello trauma, right? First, that alone, it's no one wants to say hello trauma or hello to any of these dark side terms that are in the chapters of the book. But part of why I did it was a playful way of you have to acknowledge and welcome these emotions and these constructs and that's why it's invisible. The mental and emotional well-being of who we are is invisible. How trauma physiologically impacts us and makes us feel, we cannot see. We can behaviorally look at stuff, but we're not really sure how we can determine that. So for me, I'm saying it's there. It's your teammate. Now it can be your best teammate that helps you, makes you thrive and overcome certain things. And you can utilize a lot of these things as strengths, or it can be someone who's a really detrimental teammate to you. And now you're sitting on the bench per se of life and you're not performing well and you're really struggling. And so I call it that way because I view mental illness as the invisible injury. It's things that no one can actually see. And so this is where I was putting those two things together, saying, hey, it's not going anywhere. The thing that occurred to you and the way you're making meaning of it doesn't go anywhere. You just got to figure out how you can work with it and have it be effective for you in your life.
I love it. So now I'm not tying your podcast here with it all, because your podcast covers a lot of what you talk about. Listening, I think I'm about 6 episodes in. And you talk about cover a lot of range of topics. I should just say it's this alone.
Yeah.
It's a great listen if you're listening for it. But as you're listening to it, what's the core message you're trying to have across the board? I'm trying to better educate parents to make soccer parents' lives easier. What is your core message with your podcast?
The intent is to normalize the process of being successful and make meaning of how mental health is always going to be present and how you need to actually use that and work with that and train that alongside the physical aspect. And I do this in a way with representation. And the podcast stemmed from, I did this book event to launch my book, and I had a panel of an ex-NFL player, an ex-professional volleyball player who then coached in the Olympics, and then an advocate for mental health who played collegiate football. Now he's a very big advocate for mental health in Maryland and trying to change like state laws and bills and passings for support of mental health. And through that experience of me discussing their process and their traumas that they identified and the growth and the resiliency, I realized these topics need to be spoken about more. And actually one of the members on the panel said, this really needs to be talked about. We should be having conversations about this. We should be talking about it. And I was like, yeah, great. I'm going to do a podcast. The idea is I get a lot of ex-athletes and they're all successful. They either compete at a professional level or at minimal collegiate level, and then very successful at things they're doing afterward. And for me, I'm curious as what led them to get there and then their view on mental health, mental performance. And in the first early stages, listening to these athletes, culturally, some of these players would have never sought out mental health. I never had access to it, and it wasn't a culturally part of where they were. But I wanted anyone listening to an athlete to say, man, I loved that player and I aspire to be like that. And it's so amazing to hear that they also struggled in ways that I did. And how could I get better through that? Because they're telling me now, I wish I had this resource, or I wish I learned how to do this. It's a reflective healing process, like armchair therapy with the athlete that comes in. And it's a way for the listeners, whether you're a coach, you're a fan of sport, or you're an aspiring athlete, to say, this is real. Like, we're all humans, and they went through things that I would have never known because all I see are the accolades about who they are.
It's always the tip of the iceberg. I always love the analogy of what it takes to be a high-level athlete. And it's a tip of the iceberg, and it shows everything underneath, everything they gave up, of all their traumas of sports or all their individual traumas to who made them who they are today. And I think parents have to, at a certain age, really explain to their players that they have to better understand that side of everything. Because I have an 11-year-old son, and from the time he's been 5, he has given up birthday parties, has given up all these activities because he wants to play soccer. It was his choice.
Right.
And we have flat out told him, whatever is more important to you, you go do. And that's important for you to be a kid. And I don't think too many parents will say, no, you can't go do that. And it's fascinating when it comes from the parent. Then you have a coach that comes like, no, go to the birthday party. That's more important. You're only a kid once. And I don't think enough coaches understand that side of the game. It's frustrating because they spend a lot of time with them. Diving a little bit deeper into this, from your book to your podcast, I love your TED Talk that you gave.
Thank you.
You talk about your experience as a runner at the age, I think it was 8 or 9.
Nice.
shared. And can you share a little bit more about that experience and how it shaped you to be a D1 runner to what you're doing today?
Yeah, it's funny even listening to your story. I remember a year before it. So at 9, I went to my first Junior Olympics. At 8, I remember going on a family vacation. And I came back from the family vacation and I was told that I wasn't on the 4x4 relay team. And I was devastated. And I was so angry at my parents that they didn't think about how this would impact my sport and my future. I was like an 8-year-old child. So of course I went on a family vacation, but I'm like, I'm never going on a vacation again. Like I just lost my relay spot. And anyone who's a track athlete knows the 4x4 is like the epitome of the last race of our track meet. You're like, have so much pride to be on there. And I was the third leg, which is like the go get 'em hurt leg, right? You chase after one. And I told my coach, this isn't fair. And he said, well, then you need to challenge a player on your team that's on the relay team to a 400-meter race in front of everyone at practice. And we ranged from 5 to 18-year-olds. And we're sitting in a stands. And he's like, you need to challenge them to 400. And if you win, you can be on the race. So I'm like terrified now at 8 in front of like these, who I look up to athletes. I was like, I can't lose to them. Like, I can't do this if I'm going to do this. So I challenged them. I won. I got my spot back. It's like, oh, you win story. But what people don't realize is me saying that to go after what I wanted, the ripple approach of these girls who then were mad at me and the cattiness behind that and the drama that existed was real. It was almost like I didn't earn my spot when I did earn my spot through the physical trade. So then I wasn't even welcomed on the team. It was very, very, that was the first traumatic thing I remember of that track event and my track experience. So fast forward a year later, I go to this Junior Olympics and we always wear sweatpants to warm up. It's so hot. And I'm running around and I'm like terrified. My parents didn't travel. It was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We lived in Missouri at the time. Like my parents didn't travel to this bit. So I'm with the team. My coach, she's like another father figure to me, my family friend. And I'm like alone in this huge stadium at LSU to run. I remember everything vividly and I'm freaking out. And all I could do when he asked me like if I'm good was like, yeah. I had to say yes. Yes, I was good. I couldn't tell him I was scared. I couldn't tell him I was freaking out. I couldn't tell him I didn't know if I could do this. I just said yes, and I couldn't breathe. I remember my heart was in my throat. And all he said was, you have a lot of heart. And that phrase stuck with me my entire, even now, into my professional career. Whatever I took as meaning behind that of this message my coach would constantly say is you have a lot of heart. Like to him, that was our pop term we use now is like resiliency and like that growth mindset, that grittiness. For me, I just knew that means I can just go fight and do what I wanted. And I actually did a phenomenal job of that race. I'll never forget it. Like I barely beat out the person to win. I have the photo in my parents' house still of like me and this other girl like towing at the line at the finish line. And the cool part of that photo is you can see all of my teammates and the other family member tribes that were like my family, like in there cheering me on. So it was a very beautiful, wonderful experience to have. But the intent going in is like so terrifying. And to think I did that alone, I'm like, goodness, as a mom now, I'm like, I don't know how I would ever allow my kids to go do stuff like that, travel to 5 states away to go compete and stuff. But that's what we had to do as a family. But those experiences for sure shaped me for continuously going after what I want and work through different resilient structures and this idea of masking and minimizing my emotional well-being to try to fit into what I felt was successful, what I felt I needed to do. And I continued doing that as an athlete for years because that's what sport had socialized me to do, is to just go after it and win and say you're okay and don't challenge anything or question or speak out. You just do as you're told.
I think that's drastically changing in our culture because our culture is being told to question everything now. And it's as a parent, like you said, it's very hard. We talked about these families for here in Dallas. A week ago was the Dallas Cup.
Yeah.
And you're having kids from all over the world, 21 countries, all over the United States, traveling with just their coach. And maybe 1 or 2 chaperones, and that's it. And we talked about it in our house, like one of us would have to go, is just A, to support them, and B, is to make sure that they will be fine. Even though we may not have contact with them, it's just that if something happens, one of us are not thousands of miles away.
Right.
And I don't know how parents did it back then. I don't know how parents do it today.
Yeah.
And I was talking with in one of my prior interviews, they, at the age of 14, was dropping their kid off at the airport. It was taking him in and handing him off to the coach. And then eventually it was just letting them get out of the car and they could see the coach inside the airport. And eventually it was just that.
Oh, I took my
And
first flight alone at 12, right? It's baffling to me across the country to do things. I think it shaped my independence, but almost to a detriment, I think, of not asking for help. I just was going to find a way to do it myself.
and that goes back to, I've been listening to a lot of books lately, and it's trying to teach our next generation to be independent, but also being willing to ask for help. And how do we balance the two as parents? And dealing with sports, I think it's a great avenue to have because it teaches our players to do this. And I have used this story many times. I hounded my son for 3 weeks, long and hard. And finally he goes, "Dad, just be quiet." And this was last year.
Yeah.
And I pulled over and I told him, "Thank you." And he goes,
Yeah.
"Why are you thanking me? I just told you to," pretty much told me to shut up. That's exactly what he said to me.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Why are you thanking me?" I go, "I want you to know that is a huge milestone that you just did. You know that you know when to speak up and you can always come for us for help too. You have to set that boundaries, even with me as your parent." And it's taking those moments and trying to build those scenarios where you can ask for help. And even with your own parents,
Yeah.
it's a different dynamic between my son and my wife and me. And he goes more for help for her than to me for stuff.
Right.
He's asking for help and we encourage it. And I don't think it's a bad thing for when athletes ask for help or they get frustrated. You talk about the trauma and the things that happened with your team, the pettiness. And I think we always ask my son when he gets done with practice, how was training? And did you behave? That was our first question. Did you do the things you were supposed to?
Yeah.
Were you kind? Were you respectful? And and then we followed up with what was going on with someone. And there's been moments he's broken down and he's shared with us and we give him advice on how to stand up for himself or what to do. And I think that's very important for kids to learn to process it by vocalizing and communicating. And there are safe places. And I think you mentioned it earlier that coaches need to be on this side of this equation as much as the parents are.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to your book now with your storytelling and talking about trauma being relatable. Can you share an example of how trauma can occur with young athletes and how storytelling can help them process it better?
Yeah. I think with storytelling, it's very relatable and it takes out the blaming and shaming that might exist and it doesn't make you feel minimized when you're just relatable in that storytelling process, right? I do that a lot in my own therapeutic ways when I'm working with athletes, right? Like I'll share my own examples at the way of what is appropriate self-disclosure, or I'll make a story that's mine and make it about some athlete I work with so I don't feel like I'm just sharing my own stuff. I think the idea of what trauma can experience so many different things. The first one in sport that it automatically is easy that people don't actually feel like it's trauma, but is like an injury, right? An injury is a physical trauma to the body, but then it's such an emotional trauma to the athlete, especially at what age they're at. And if they're a youth athlete, I see this a lot, especially for our high school female athletes, right? They're so susceptible to ACL injuries when they're getting that hormonal change in their body and then their bodies switch and they have more susceptibility to ACL tears. Soccer, basketball, we see that presently available. But my high school athletes experience this injury that's so significant it takes them out of their sport for at least 9 months, right? At minimum before they're cleared. It's traumatic, not alone for the injury itself and not being able to do things that you used to do, but now you can't be around the people that were like your friends and your go-to relatable people, your teammates, and you're not in their conversations and inside jokes and you're not competing with them or training with them because you're not physically able to. And then you're isolated by your own training by yourself and you're doing PT and you're doing all this hard work that a lot of people can't see. And so I'm always encouraging my injured athletes of how can we stay involved? How can we stay connected? How can we find who we are outside of the sport? And encouraging the coaches and the teammates to check in on these athletes, right? And make them feel part of it, have a role, even if they're not in play. And it's very hard at the club level to have a role because at school, you can at least be around and do weight room with them and show up for practices. But when you're a club athlete and you no longer can play, it's like, how do you encourage that athlete to go to practice? How do you encourage them to be present and involved? And that takes a lot of time and commitment. So that's a very easy one for me. This is traumatic. We have to do way better with our injured athletes. The other side of things that people aren't realizing, especially at the adolescent level, coaches are another parental figure. They have a lot of power around the role they play on the athlete's lives. So athletes naturally are played to perform for their parents, and then they transition to play and perform for their coach. It doesn't happen until about 16 or 17 when there's this kind of identity shift where the athlete then becomes to take ownership of who am I, and I'm separate from the views of mom and dad, or I'm separate from the views of coach, and now I can play for myself. And what does that look like? That takes a lot of training for them to know that. So they're constantly saying, I have to please mom, dad. I have to please my parents. And I have to please my coaches. And I have to have them view my success deems I'm good enough. And they take it very personal, not that they were good at soccer or good at basketball. They're good at life if they do well on the field. And when an athlete isn't playing, when an athlete gets benched without explanation and the coach doesn't talk to them about what their role is, and when an athlete is publicly shamed, called out of their names, the things that exist out of frustration from coaches, own frustrations of wins, losses, training, whatever it might be like, that emotional vulnerability is so raw that those athletes really struggle and will internalize this. And they internalize it about who they are as a person, of not feeling good enough, not feeling capable. And then you add in a social component. And if you have some rough teammates that are not good teammates, then someone's being picked on and there's this fear of evaluation. And the two things that impact our athletes the most are fear of evaluation and fear of failure. And if we're falling in that trap and then we worry about what other people are thinking, then their identity of self-worth really gets impacted. It can be pretty detrimental to their emotional well-being.
All right, a quick break. This one's for my fellow grassroots coaches. We all know how tough it is to keep every kid engaged and still running a great session when time is tight. That's why I'm excited to partner with Soccer Coach Weekly. Since 2006, they've helped over 50,000 coaches, parents, teachers from all over the world. And here's the best part. As a Chat by the Pitch listener, you can get 50% off a full year of premium access. Just click the link in the show notes and apply the code EN50. And again, that's EN50 for 50% off. Plan fast, coach smart, Soccer Coach Weekly.
You hit on a couple of things because it's a few things that I'm actually working on with a couple of coaches because I have access to so many people. Yeah. It's fun that I get to talk to so many coaches. And one thing we did talk about was peer evaluations. And are you talking peer evaluations as in they're being critical outside of a constructive environment, or more of I get the calling out? That's a topic we talk about quite a bit. But I look at the peer side because I feel sometimes the peer side actually motivates players to do better. But is there a way that we can look at it from a parent or a coach perspective to better help the players understand that, yes, words have consequences? It's like I always tell my son after a game, make sure I always put my arm around him and tell him I love him. I do the same thing with my 7-year-old daughter now. Yeah. And it took me a long time to get to that place. And he knows that I say 3 things to him. I always tell him if I'm proud of him, that means his behavior was well and he was respectful to his teammates and the officials. And then if I compliment something he did, that means I'm complimenting he played well. Yeah. And if I don't do those other 2 things, he knows that something was wrong.
Yeah, he can read between the lines.
He's smart enough to read between the lines. But I always make sure I tell him I love him. And that will never change of whatever happens. And as a parent, it took me a long time to understand that role. But looking at it from the teammates, in the moment they're critical. But and that's where I'm trying to get through this, is trying to understand from my perspective of, how do I describe it? Is it more of the harassment on the bench and the truly picking on and bullying on the bench, or is it the frustration in the moment?
So when athletes want this fear of evaluation, oftentimes it's, I'm afraid to make a mistake because if I do, then what will my teammates think? What will my parents think? What will my coaches think? Am I not good enough? Am I not capable? Am I bad? Will they not trust me or rely on me? And so they'll take one mistake. Let's say they try to do a long ball in soccer and totally overshot it and it goes out of bounds, but they do that 2 or 3 times in the game. Now they feel like, gosh, I'm not good at this. My teammates will never pass me the ball or expect me to be able to get a ball to them. They'll do a lot of criticism themselves. They're making up their own script from what they perceive their teammates would do. It gets true and I would say, what's the evidence in that thought? If they also hear teammates talking bad about other people, and maybe they're not talking about them, but it's, that person can't do X, Y, or Z. And we hear a lot of teams just doing this, right? Or talking bad about other teams. Oh, they're not capable of this, or they can't do this. And every human has what we call thinking traps. And if your thinking trap is personalization or minimization or mind reading, now you're falling in these traps and you're hearing a word not even related to you as teammates talk about some other team, but they're doing something that you personally done. So they're going to go in this spiral thinking, they think that about me as well. Now I really can't mess up. And it puts more pressure upon the athlete because they're always constantly trying to prove their worth to all these external factors. And that's super pride. It always happens in our life. We still have social comparison at the age of 5. It takes a lot of work to be able to just take care of yourself and own your own roles. But it's very common in that adolescent phase because that's when the adolescent is trying to do identity formation in general. They're trying to figure out who they are as a human. And now you have this who am I as an athlete, and the athlete is what they define as who they are. So we can see if we don't have a safe environment that culturally supports empathy and growth and mistakes and understanding your roles and trying things out and encourages and validates. If the environment is not like that and it's very critical and high pressure and high pace, then we see this emotional struggle exist internally for these athletes.
So it's the reassurance that mistakes are okay and that it doesn't matter. I think it's going to be the harder part coming from the peers than the coaches. I know that's one thing I do talk about with coaches, especially with soccer. It's normally the first person that makes a big mistake ends up getting a goal. And how do you evaluate players and encourage mistakes? Because you'll never know who they are until they do make mistakes. I think that has to be brought down to the peer side, and that takes time. And how do you advise parents and players and coaches to be more encouraging then in these moments? Because not everyone has a great parents that don't talk, because it comes from home. If you hear a lot
For
of
sure. Yeah. I think there's two faults to this, right? I actually think peers are a lot better at encouraging and challenging mistakes when we let them have free play. So if you watch soccer teams and players, and I think that's when I was working at Austin FC, like my favorite time of any observation is post-training when these guys are just playing. And they're playing their own games of a shooting drill. And they're playing soccer tennis. And they're doing other fun things and making up who can juggle the most. And it's just free play. There's so much mistake building in that, right? Because they're going for the long shot. They're going for some crazy like attempt to get the best touch. But like the partner passes wild things and it's like they're never going to touch that because they're trying to win. But then they somehow magically get this great touch and send it back. And it's like beautiful to watch free play. And these guys make mistakes all the time, right? And it's like competition. It's their own competition. Oh man, let's do it again. They're constantly like getting more reps to see if they can beat their buddy. Where coaches say, I want you to make mistakes. I want you to do this. Yet they contradict themselves when they do a drill. And then if 2 mistakes happen, then they have to get punished and go run. So then they're mismessaging, I want you to make mistakes, but I'm going to punish you if you make too many mistakes. And they're trying to set this tone for like conditioning and high focus. And they're not setting the environment for mistake making. More free play, and if we just let them play, it allows a lot of creativity and ability to just take risks and take chances and encouraging that. So it's really interesting with that area. The other part that I thought of that is great parent tip. Oftentimes in the car ride home, you struggle what to say, and then you go on this speech, and then you're always talking about, oh, so-and-so did so great, right? You're highlighting some teammate that played really well, or they did this thing really well. Well, your athletes in the backseat listening to how great their teammate was, and they're thinking how great they weren't or what they didn't do. And so I always encourage parents, just listen, let the kid take the lead on what they want to talk about, but definitely don't talk about any other teammate or anything that person did really well on skill level, unless the athlete's bringing up in that conversation, but more so from way of, oh, they were a great teammate to you. I loved how they did X, Y, or Z for you, and highlight the personal characteristics of who they were versus the skill, because you don't want your athlete to fall in the comparison trap of that person's better than me. And here's what they're doing, bring it out.
I think that's hard because I think it's how we as a society is compare and contrast. It's from, and even though we may think our athlete's doing great and phenomenal, we're just praising this other athlete. That's very hard. I'll be honest. We do talk about who does well in the game and what they did well. I think in my head, I think we're trying to encourage him to find the good that kids are doing so he can give them compliments later, or when he sees them again, celebrate them in that moment. And just like we try to celebrate him in his moment, I think that's a very hard thing to do. And especially if parents leave bad taste in other parents' mouths, or
Right.
so to speak. And it's very hard not to be critical in the car ride.
Yeah.
And then their kids pick it up. I wholeheartedly believe that. And as you have done this and talking, to me, soccer it's my addiction. And following it and listening and talking to all these people, how would you advise coaches and parents to look for these signs that players might have some type of trauma that might need help or they are being overlooked, especially for coaches, because they do spend so much time. And as much as many of them don't want to admit, they have a greater influence on the player than the parents at times.
Oh, yeah. I think coaches really need to understand their role and power that they have. They're not just teaching X's and O's. That's not the case. Like, they are an emotional role model for these young athletes to aspire to be and learn from. They take the feedback so significantly, to your point, sometimes more than what a parent's going to say. It can be the same message, but if it comes from a coach, it might be like way more impactful. Oh, coach said X, Y, or Z. I'm going to don't do this. I'm going to tell you that for like years. Like the idea of make your bed every day because it's going to make you more disciplined and start off at a good foot. So I've been trying to make your bed since you're 5. So I think one, for these coaches, in that role of importance, but the first simple tool I tell everyone is like connection. Connection is essential. So get to practice early yourself. Like, I get frustrated. My kids in the soccer academy, and I love this young coach, but he's always late to the field. And I'm like, dude, I feel like kid can't be here before you. You need to be there before she's there. But so have coaches be on field ready or on the court ready, wherever they're at, and connect to every player that comes in. Intentionally fist bump, elbow, high five, make a physical connection to that person, look them in the eye, because then you can assess what's their body language, what's their tone of voice, how are they presently showing up to your space to train? Because then you can intervene a lot quicker. Like, are they really tired? Like, hey man, what's up? You seem a little off today. Oh, I just had the STAR test. I'm exhausted, so my brain's not on. Okay, great. I got to change warm up. I got to make it a little bit more fun because maybe the coach got a STAR test week, and so these kids are tired. Or everyone's bumping and this kid is like tying his shoe a lot longer, taking more breaks, isolating. These are things you want to check in on, and finding systems of how often you check in with them, right? And not pulling them all the time. Do you have side conversations? Do you have an assistant who can also help you and say, hey, why don't you go check in with Tommy? He seems a little bit down today. Or he's really aggressive in nature and he's really loud. Like, any abnormal difference in how they are, then we want to pay attention and be curious about. That can be side conversation that can look at it that day and then bring attention to the next time you see them, but not having it go unnoticed. The other part, if you really are invested in those areas, I call it like truck talk time. Like, when do you have time to talk with these players as a team, as a circle? We do several compliments. We do shout outs to people. We have a place where, yes, we want to praise, but we also might be like, hey, does anyone have anything going on that we want to talk about? Has anything been really hard? Can you create a space in your team to allow them to talk about struggles and talk about emotions and talk about stuff, and have that be the norm, and having those moments built in can prevent some of these things already.
I think that is a huge part of this. It's being engaged. I think too many coaches have too many teams and they can't keep up with it, and they can't connect, they can't relate. And as a parent that has done this, I always talk to coaches, and one of my first questions I always ask is, how many teams do you have?
Mm.
If they have 3 teams that are playing 11v11, they have a minimum of 15 kids, they have a minimum of 45 players they are ultimately responsible for.
Right.
And trying to be part of it. And now if they have one more team, how in the world are you ever going to be with 60 kids? Teachers struggle with that, and then when you go off to college, it's this isolated door. I call it it's the invisible wall between you and your professor. There's never that connection. Professors don't care. You come in, you take your class. And I think we have to learn at some point. At the same time, a professor is much different than your college coach, or not your college coach, but your club coach or your high school coach, because they do see you on a regular basis. They do have those small interactions with you. And to create those moments, and that's something as a parent, that's what, going back to what I said, if you have 3 teams and you have 45 kids, how will you ever be able to isolate moments to secure that time with my player to make sure he's getting what he needs from you, or she's getting what...
I think that's the hard part, right? Effective coaches can find ways, but to your point, when we're overloading and we're the sole person, right? Like, even for me, I want to be a phenomenal mom. I got 4 kids. Can I have a conversation with all 4 kids at the same time? Like, it's exhausting. Like, I can't pay attention to all the needs, and I know that, right? So I have to be intentional, being like, okay, How do I get one-on-one time with them? How do I make them feel heard and seen every day? But then how do they get special time? Because they're unconsciously, unintentionally fighting for my attention against their sisters all the time. And this is magnified on the team if it's just right. And then that coach is in their head, because we can't deny the fact that coaches are all about wins and loss and their record. And that is what their livelihood is based upon. As much as we want them to be a positive role model and supportive person, like if they're not winning games, eventually they're not going to get their job. And so sometimes they get caught up in their own practice plans and game plans and wins and the stress and pressure upon that. And this is where I say in my field as sports psychology, we've focused for so long on getting the buy-in that mental performance and mental health is really important for athletes. And let's help the athletes. And I'm like, now it's time to actually work with our coaches. Like our coaches actually need to do their own mental and emotional well-being and have their own performance coach and have their own mindset to help understand how can we be intentional and set up a space and a culture that allows these athletes to feel seen, heard, valued, whatever their role is, and develop them on the field.
I'll have to give props to my son's club because I do talk to quite a few coaches from it. And I know I've known the DOC for all my years in soccer as an adult, which is 5 years, and which is not that long. But that is something they started within the club, was a mentoring program for coaches, is to have that place to come and have those conversations and seek advice. And from someone that might have just as many years of experience, but their approach to the game is completely different because of the age groups that they have worked with throughout their career. And I find it very fascinating that some of them are thriving with it and some of them are, I call it on the struggle long more, whatever you want to call it. It's not going well in the neighborhood, like on the pitch. They're just struggling to catch up. And it's fascinating to see that. Now, with trauma and all this other stuff, how do you see the difference between a high level like Austin FC and youth, and how do they cross over and have similar trends that you have observed over time now?
Well, they're all high pressure and it doesn't go away when you're a professional athlete or a youth athlete, right? Like, one would think that, the pressure must be more when you're at a professional level. And I'm like, well, at a younger level, you're trying to make it to that professional level. Sport itself is pressure. But where my athletes struggle the most, and this is a common trend, is what I said earlier, that fear of failure, fear of evaluation, and truly not knowing who they are outside of sport. They need to be more than a soccer player. They need to have other things that make them feel valued and whole, because the normal commonalities that might experience are different. You fail a test, that's really problematic, right? As you're an adult, you can't pay your bills. That's very difficult. It's same pressure, right? And same things. Or you're not starting, right? As a professional, like your job is playing. And if you're not playing and performing, then you're not going to get the money that you need. You're not going to get a contract. You're worried about your livelihood. As a student, if you're not passing your tests, if you're not performing, then you're not going to play and you're not going to be able to have eligibility. So there's other pressures. Real traumas that exist that I think we still struggle with is the loss, grief and loss of death that occurs, whether that's a family member, if it's a teammate. When I look at the professionals, a lot of things that we work through is transitional times of when you're becoming a parent, on the time away. I spend a lot of time in male sports when these men are becoming parents and training them on like, how do you take time away? And you're choosing to take time away from your family because this is your job. And what does that look like? And how can you be a dad? And the identity of being a father is a different level that we have to work through. There's loss with that exists if they did have a death of a child, of things of different natures that are real life events that occur. Like life doesn't stop just because you're playing sport. You now manage sport on top of life. And that is a lot to manage if you don't have proper emotional support and well-being in the system you're in.
I think that's something that's hugely missing on every aspect. I'm not going to take a step away from sports. It's even in the business world. Yes, a lot of companies have EAP, an employee assistant program now, but at the end of the day, it is still a stigma to go use it. And it's still a stigma to, as an athlete, I think it's even more so because you're supposed to be these, I don't care what gender you are, you're supposed to be these strong, resilient people, and to go seek help is a sign of weakness. And to me, if you're struggling with your first touch, going to an assistant coach, say, I need to get this better, is that a sign of weakness or is that a sign of determination or grit, whatever you want to call it? It's no different when it comes to the mental stuff. And I think we need to step away and really realize that how much of an aspect. I love the show Ted Lasso. I'll give props to it. They talked very heavily about it in the last couple of seasons of the show.
Right.
And I truly think when a player is is very healthy mentally, you'll get well beyond what they're physically capable of doing.
Yeah.
And I think we as parents don't understand that. I think most modern coaches don't understand that. And even past coaches, it's something that have always been missing. And now when you go talk to all these big professional clubs, they all have some type of coaching involved that's affiliated to help them overcome, I guess, the mental side, the mental strong side of the game. I don't know if you want to call it mindfulness or whatever it may be, but it's there now. And I'm glad to see we're seeing it at the top. England's been doing it for years with the EPL. We're slowly catching up in the MLS.
Yeah, we're not even close. Yes, it's growing, I will say. And I think the misconception, the myth is two things. You can be performing really well and emotionally be struggling. And people don't understand that, right? And you can also be really happy in life and then just not doing well in your profession or in your sport. It's like, why is that? And that impacts you emotionally. The other thing is people don't have to come talk and work on their mental game just because you're not doing well. And that's where we're trying to shift is, can we have this be a preventative law? Can we have this just as a regular coach, not just as a need when there's a problem that exists? To your point, yes, Europe's had it great for a long time. They don't just have one person. They have 5 practitioners across the domain, from the academy system to coaches, to second team to first team. And it's like phenomenal with all their programming and implementation. The MLS is actually one of the slowest professional leagues to integrate and have mental performance or sports psychology as a part of their system. It's still not across every team. It's not in their CBA. I'm hoping in 2026, when it becomes the new CBA, that they would require this. That's what every other league did, is eventually put some capacity or criteria around having a provider there, whether it's on contract, it's a certain number of hours a week, it's available for them. MLS, I think, is for sure trying. Like, I just saw a new position for the national team and wanting to have a clinical director for the national team and create programs for national camps and across the system. So I do believe we're on a switch for, hey, we need to actually create this for our players. Partly to your point earlier, the generational shift of athletes wanting this and seeking this out and having access to this has become a lot more prevalent than in previous years and generations, where these players are like, no, this is my standard. I've had it since I was like 12. I work with these youth athletes all the time, and to have them expect to not have it when they're professional would be weird to them. They're used to having a coach in that domain for them. So I do believe we're at a cusp of normalization. I want it to be like our field. I'm hopeful that it will mirror how strength and conditioning and athletic training started, where it was one provider to then 5 providers. I'm hoping we see that with the mental health or performance domain, where it goes from one provider for 2 to 3 providers per team, because so many athletes, there's so many people to work with. There's cultures, organizational shifts to exist and to have, I guess, visibility, right? The EAP part, it's like you can call this number and go talk to somebody. The hotline access doesn't work. Like, you need to have someone that you trust that's presently around, that gets it and can speak the language. And to your point, even at the club level, yeah, okay, I coached 3 teams and I didn't notice. But if you have someone walking around the pitches and seeing what's happening, paying attention to your team and checking in and has access, and they're there, now there's another person that has eyes on who you're working with and is a support, and players know them and can come and go, even if it's like a touch point every other week. Like, they're checking in, like they know a person's there as well to get help from.
That's will be a magnitude to shift in our culture. In the United States, mental health is something that's still a huge stigma. When you bring it up, people think you're like, why? Just get over it. It's the mentality. And it's just not that easy.
Yeah. Well, and to the point, and this goes on my soapbox, like, mental health is not mental illness, right? Mental health, we all have. Right. How are your thoughts and feelings? But we're often saying, oh man, I'm struggling with my mental health. It's like, oh, you must be depressed. No, actually, I'm just sad. I'm just sad because my dog died and I'm really struggling emotionally, but it doesn't mean that I'm going into a deep depression if I have tools to work through it. But we get so caught up in these terms and socialization that everything's mental health. I'm like, oh, so you're just talking about how healthy your thoughts and feelings are? Or are you actually talking about that you have chemical imbalance and disorder that we need to treat, like cancer, the flu, COVID, things like that, of a physical illness? I do a lot of just semantic education and be like, we all have mental health. We don't all have mental health.
The tools and resources and things along that line for coaches to have at their disposal. Do you think, how do we create an environment where it has to start from the top with the club all the way down? If you're talking youth sports, it has to start with whoever is the president of the club making this a priority. and making sure. But you brought up the coach's side. I don't think that's talked about enough.
Right.
And I think if it's coming from the top, if there's not a safe place for the coach to have a conversation or someone just to unload on every now and then, they will implode. As I've done my podcast, I share articles every day. I read probably a dozen articles a day.
Amazing. Yeah.
And I share them with all these coaches. I have about a dozen coaches I share articles with. Some of them say, I read probably about a third of what you sent, or I might read one a week.
Yeah.
I'll just have to pick one. And sometimes I'll put comments with it, like why I'm sending it. And I have a coach that has told me, like, where do you find time for this? And I go, you have to make it a priority. This is my mental health time, is reading these articles. Like, to me, this is my escape because it's soccer. I love it. And it's giving me a different angle. As a parent, to understand the coaching side a little bit better helps me better prepare my player to know what he needs to have as a coach.
Yep.
If I understand the game, I may not be able to do the soul rolls and the Maradona or whatever else you want to call, whatever else they do out there, or do them at all. But if I can have a coach that can emotionally and not just physically help him, I think that's a huge advantage point. And I think culture is part of this.
He's retired now, but he's never retired from the game. He's still always posting about track meets and showing up. He's been the greatest influence for me, for sure.
Hey everyone, I hope you all enjoyed this week's episode. I know there's a lot here to digest. There's a lot to be here. I think when I was all said and done, I think I had 8 pages of notes for this interview, so it tells you how many notes I took for it. There was so much we talked about. There's been some back and forth because I've had questions since this interview. I hope you all enjoy this first part, and so I hope you will all listen to next week's.
Hey everyone, if you guys have enjoyed this podcast, have enjoyed what I've been trying to do, the messages that I'm putting out there, please give me some ratings, some stars on all the podcast sites that you listen to this on. Give me a review, share this, share with others. The more I can make this grow, the more I can continue doing this. I'm really trying to make a difference in our soccer community, so I hope you guys have enjoyed all this. And until next time, I'll see you at the pitch.